have you ever been trusted with, like, a massive secret?
Yeah.
You know, something really high stakes, like a surprise birthday party.
Oh, yeah. Always stressful.
Right. And you managed to keep it perfectly hidden for weeks. And then you accidentally ruin it by casually mentioning the cake to the guest of honor.
It is a universally awful feeling. I mean, you watch the words just hang in the air and you realize the damage is done before your brain can even, send the signal to close your mouth.
Exactly.
Yes.
And the weirdest part is how totally ordinary it feels right up until the disaster.
Yeah, there's no dramatic music playing.
No, exactly. Like, you didn't sit them down in some dimly lit room and make this dramatic movie-style confession under a swinging light bulb. You were literally just talking about baked goods, and the secret simply escaped.
Right.
It just slipped out in the middle of a totally mundane conversation.
Which I think really points to a fundamental human struggle. Because the brain is, at its core, a pattern-matching communicative organ. It desperately wants to share information. So when you force it to sequester a specific piece of data, you are essentially fighting its primary function.
It's kind of like having a heavy software application running in the background of your smartphone.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, like, you might be using your phone to just check the weather, but that hidden background app is quietly draining your battery and, slowing down your RAM.
Right.
Keeping a secret forces your brain to constantly monitor every conversation, filtering what you can and cannot say. It's this active, exhausting cognitive load.
It really is.
And the atlas of multilingual idioms we're diving into today shows us that the way you accidentally ruin that party, or rather, how you conceptualize ruining it, depends entirely on the language you speak.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
So today, we're going to trace a single secret across English, Turkish, and Lithuanian to see how different cultures, map the psychology of hidden knowledge.
And looking at this through the lens of linguistics reveals something pretty profound, I think. Idioms aren't just decorative phrases.
Right.
The atlas frames them as compressed cultural philosophies. So when you look at how a language describes a secret, you're actually looking at the mechanical blueprints of how that culture understands vulnerability and trust and social risk.
Okay, let's start with the phrase we use in English to describe that terrible moment with the birthday cake. We say, "You spilled the beans."
Ağzındaki the beans, right?
And we say it so often that the actual visual image is just completely dead to us.
We really do. We treat it as a single unit of vocabulary rather than, a physical scenario.
Yeah.
But if you slow down and look at the actual physics of the metaphor, it tells you exactly how English speakers perceive the escape of information.
Well, I was thinking about the actual mechanics of spilling beans, like why beans? Why not spilled milk or dropped rocks?
Right. Why that specific object?
Yeah, because if you are holding a fragile container of beans, you're holding a collection of tiny, loose, hard objects.
Mm-hmm.
And if you bump into someone and that container tips, the beans don't just fall in a straight line, they scatter. They have all this kinetic energy.
They go everywhere.
Exactly. They bounce off the linoleum, they roll under the refrigerator, they just go in 100 different directions.
And that physical dispersion perfectly mimics the social dispersion of a secret.
Oh, right.
Because a secret isn't just one solid block of data, is it? It's a collection of details. It's who's involved, what happened, when it's going down.
Right.
So when that container tips, the information scatters into the social ecosystem. And the crucial element here, which the atlas heavily emphasizes, is irreversibility.
Yes. The irreversibility.
You can never perfectly gather all those beans back up. You will always miss one that rolled under the stove.
That makes so much sense. But what really strikes me about the English idiom is how it entirely bypasses the concept of intent.
How do you mean?
Well, spilling implies a clumsy accident, right? It's just a lapse in coordination. If I spill my coffee, you might be annoyed with me, but you don't think I'm a fundamentally malicious person.
Ah, I see what you're saying.
The phrase acts as this subtle defense mechanism. It allows the person who revealed the secret to say, "Hey, I didn't betray you. The container just tipped." It focuses entirely on the chaotic aftermath rather than the moral weight of the action.
That is a really vital distinction.
Yeah.
The English idiom forces us to look down at the messy floor.
Yeah.
The narrative is entirely about the collateral damage and the impossibility of cleaning it up. But the act of keeping the secret, the time before the spill, is mostly absent from the metaphor. You're just passively holding a container.
Which naturally makes me wonder about the buildup. Because holding a container doesn't adequately describe that background app battery drain we were talking about earlier.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't capture the internal friction of keeping the secret.
And to find that, the atlas actually points us toward Turkish.
Okay.
In Turkish, the metaphor shifts away from external objects in your hands and moves directly into the physical body.
Into the body.
Yeah. The Turkish equivalent for revealing a secret is baklayı çıkarmak.
Meaning, literally, taking the broad bean out of one's mouth.
Yes, taking the broad bean out of your mouth. In Turkish, the framework for secrecy is located entirely at the physical boundary between the internal mind and the external world.
The mouth.
Exactly, the mouth. The secret is imagined as a literal broad bean sitting on the speaker's tongue.
Okay, the specificity of it being a broad bean is what really catches my attention here.
Oh, what's that?
Because a broad bean is not like a tiny grain of rice that you could easily ignore. It's a substantial, awkward, starchy thing.
It takes up space.
Right. If I am literally walking around all day with a broad bean in my mouth, it distorts everything I do. I can't articulate my words properly. I can't eat. I am hyper-aware of this foreign object.
Yeah, you'd constantly be feeling it.
So does the Turkish idiom imply that the very act of holding a secret fundamentally distorts your ability to communicate normally?
It absolutely does. The atlas refers to this as the body logic of the idiom.
Body logic. I like that.
It's very visceral. The Turkish metaphor acknowledges that keeping a secret is not a passive state. It is an active, unnatural obstruction. You're basically fighting the biological urge to have a clear airway, to speak with a relaxed jaw.
Wow.
The secret isn't just something you carry, it's something that actively impedes you.
So the focus isn't on the mess on the floor, like in English. The focus is on the overwhelming relief of finally getting this annoying thing out of your face.
Exactly. When you finally take the bean out of your mouth, it's driven by physical exhaustion.
Right.
You reach a point where the internal pressure, the awkwardness, the tension of the unsaid word, it just becomes too much to bear. You just have to spit it out.
You literally spit it out.
Yeah, and there's an inherent, slightly comic relief built into the phrase. The listener understands that you didn't reveal the secret to cause harm. You revealed it because you simply couldn't tolerate the obstruction for one more second.
But there is a common thread here between English and Turkish that seems like, I don't know, a psychological trick. Both cultures are using food to describe the violation of trust.
Oh, that's true.
We've got scattered beans and chewed up broad beans.
Correct.
It feels like an elaborate linguistic strategy to soften the blow.
It is. It's a form of social cushioning. By mapping the abstract concept of a compromised secret onto ordinary, agrarian, harmless objects like beans, the language actually lowers the temperature of the confrontation.
How so?
Well, think about it. If you tell me a deeply personal secret and I tell someone else, that is a severe breach of intimacy.
Yeah, it's a huge deal.
But if I confess to you by saying, I just took the bean out of my mouth, I am subconsciously inviting you to view my failure as a mundane, slightly foolish, bodily reality rather than a targeted attack on your trust.
It's domestic imagery. You can't be furious at someone for dropping groceries or spitting out a weird vegetable.
Exactly. It de-escalates the tension.
But what happens if we refuse to play that game? Like, what does a language look like when a culture decides not to cushion the blow with playful metaphors?
Yeah.
When they strip away the beans entirely and just stare the reality of a broken secret right in the face?
The atlas gives us a really stark answer to that question when we look at Lithuanian.
Okay, let's go to Lithuania.
In Lithuanian, the food imagery vanishes completely. The idioms used to describe the release of hidden information are "Ağzındaki paslapti" and "ifopati."
Let's look at the mechanics of those, because the tonal shift here is almost jarring based on what we've just talked about.
Oh, it is.
There's absolutely no domestic comedy here.
There really isn't. "Ishwapati" roughly translates to blurting out or an excess of speech.
Okay.
It suggests a failure of verbal discipline, like you just couldn't regulate your output. But the second phrase, "Ağzındaki paslapti," carries immense weight.
What does it mean?
Well, paslapti means secret. But "Ağzındaki" literally translates to betraying or giving away to an enemy.
To betray a secret. Wow. That fundamentally reworks the entire social dynamic we've been discussing.
Completely.
You aren't a clumsy person who tipped a jar, and you aren't an exhausted person who needed to clear their throat. You are a traitor.
Yes. The language explicitly categorizes the act as a moral failing. The Lithuanian framework doesn't treat the secret as a physical object, like beans that can be accidentally misplaced. It treats the secret as a binding social contract.
And if the secret is a contract, then the information itself is almost like communal property.
Exactly.
Because In the English framing, once I give you a secret, it's in your container. It's your problem now. But in the Lithuanian framing, the secret remains this invisible tether between the two of them.
Right.
If you break that tether, you haven't just made a mess. You have actively damaged the relationship.
And this points to a deeper historical and cultural architecture. Languages that develop stark, morally absolute terminology for the sharing of information often evolve in environments where social cohesion is paramount.
That makes a lot of sense.
In tight-knit communities, information isn't casual. Knowing who has resources, who is allied with whom, or who is vulnerable, that information is currency.
It's survival.
Exactly. Leaking it isn't a social faux pas. It has real-world, sometimes dangerous consequences for the community. So the language evolves to reflect the severity of that risk.
So the linguistic boundary is reinforced with moral electric wire. Essentially, it holds you entirely accountable.
Yes, there's no escaping it.
I can't just shrug and say, oops, spilled the beans. The language forces me to look you in the eye and say, I betrayed your confidence.
It strips away the comforting alibi of an accident, and this brings us to a really fascinating psychological threshold. If we step back from the atlas, we have to consider how these distinct linguistic frameworks actually alter the human experience of keeping the secret.
You mean the idea that the language we use shapes our perception of reality?
Yes, drawing on the concept of linguistic relativity.
Right.
The way your language forces you to categorize an action can actually change your physiological response to it.
Okay, let's play that out because that is wild.
Let's do it.
If I am an English speaker and someone tells me a secret, my cultural programming tells me I'm holding a fragile jar of beans. I might feel a bit of low-level anxiety about tripping and making a mess.
Right, a slight nervousness.
But if I am a Lithuanian speaker and my language explicitly defines the failure to keep a secret as a moral betrayal, does my body physically experience a higher stress load? Like, does my brain perceive the secret not just as an awkward obstruction, but as a high-stakes threat to my social survival?
The evidence strongly suggests that the framing dictates the friction.
Wow.
If your linguistic environment categorizes a slip of the tongue as a betrayal of the tribe, your nervous system is going to treat that information with a much higher degree of vigilance.
You be on high alert.
Exactly. You will likely experience a stronger cortisol response, a deeper sense of stress when you're forced to conceal that information because the perceived penalty for failure is so much higher.
Whereas the Turkish speaker is primarily dealing with the sensory frustration of the bean in their mouth.
Right.
The stress isn't about being exiled from the tribe. The stress is about the sheer exhaustion of not being able to speak freely. The discomfort is intensely personal and physical, rather than communal and moral.
Exactly. And the underlying human vulnerability is universal. Our minds profoundly struggle to contain hidden information.
We just aren't built for it.
We aren't. We are wired to connect, to share, to synchronize our understanding of the world with the people around us. Keeping a secret acts as a dam against that natural flow of communication.
Yeah.
But the flavor of the struggle, whether it feels like a clumsy balancing act, a choking hazard, or a heavy moral weight, is dictated by the linguistic map you were handed at birth.
It's incredible how a simple phrase acts as a mirror for our internal architecture. We take this completely invisible, weightless thing, a piece of restricted knowledge, and we're so desperate to understand our own struggle with it that we have to give it physical dimension.
Trying to make it real.
We have to turn it into a scattered mess on the floor, or an annoying vegetable on the tongue, or a severed bond between friends, just so we can wrap our minds around why it hurts to hold it.
We map our psychological reality onto the physical world so that we can navigate it. And the real insight of this multilingual atlas is that there is no single correct way to experience a secret.
Right.
By looking at how other cultures frame the exact same struggle, we get a much higher resolution picture of our own behavior.
It certainly makes you hyper-aware of the words you use. I mean, we started today with the messy, chaotic aftermath of the English spilled beans. We felt the uncomfortable pressure-building obstruction of the Turkish broad bean, and we faced the stark, uncompromising accountability of the Lithuanian betrayal.
Which leaves us with a pretty fascinating lens to apply to our own life.
I think so. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm just struck by how much energy we all spend trying to manage the unsaid things in our lives.
I'd actually encourage you to try a little thought experiment the next time someone leans in, lowers their voice, and trusts you with a piece of hidden information.
Oh, I like this.
Whether it's a surprise birthday party or something much heavier, take a brief moment to scan your own physical reaction.
Notice what your body is doing.
Yes. How does your body actually process the arrival of that secret? Do you suddenly feel like your hands are trying to balance a precarious, fragile container?
Right.
Do you feel a strange, phantom tension in your jaw and tongue, as if you're physically biting down on the words to keep them inside? Or do you feel a heavy, settling weight on your shoulders, a sudden awareness of a moral tether that you are now responsible for maintaining?
It is entirely possible that the idiom you instinctively reach for when you think about a secret is quietly writing the script for how your nervous system responds to it, which is definitely something to keep in mind the next time you're trying to hide the existence of a birthday cake. Thank you for taking this journey with us today and exploring the hidden architecture of the words we use every day. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.